With the start of the Islanders 2024-2025 season less than a week away, we have our 10 bold predictions for the season coming up. We've got that and a lot more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We have got a busy show here today. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on today's show, feel free to email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever it is that's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis, and it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. The season is coming up fast, and we are going to have our 10 bold predictions for the New York Islanders this year. And look, I'm not one of those guys who's going to make predictions that are just crazy. You know, I'm not going to sit there and say, yeah, Bo Horvat's going to score 80 goals this year. He's going to lead the NHL in scoring. That's not the way I'm going to do things. Yes, these are our bold predictions, but they are also reasonable predictions, and we will see how they all pan out. I'm going to start with the newcomers. How are the two big newcomers, namely Anthony Duclair and Maxim Tsplakov, going to fare in their first season on Long Island? And I'm pretty optimistic, really, about both of these guys. Duclair, I think, playing on a line with Bo and Barzy, is capable of getting 25 goals and 55 points. I think that's a reasonable expectation. The key for Duclair, and I think it's something that got him into trouble, one of the reasons why he's been on so many teams in his NHL career. He's a good offensive player, but he needs to pay close attention to what he does without the puck. I know Islander fans, we've never discussed this with any other player, right? Under Barry Trotz, Lane Lambert, Patrick Waugh, really since Lou Lamoriello took over, we know that this team, it matters what you do without the puck. And there are no guys on this roster who are 50, 60 goal scorers where, okay, you know, if Mike Bossy didn't play great defense, you live with it because he's putting so many pucks in the net. Anthony Duclair is a solid top six guy, but he's not an elite goal scorer. But I think he will do just enough to stay in Waugh's good graces. I think their relationship that they had back in juniors is going to help make things a little better because Duclair knows what to expect from Waugh and the way he does things. I think Duclair will benefit from playing with Bo Horvat and Matthew Barzal, that trio will be mostly intact for the entire season. And I think it's 25 goals, 55 points for Anthony Duclair this year. As for Maxim Tsplakov, that's a tougher one because you don't know how a KHL player translates their game to the NHL. And maybe more importantly, with Tsplakov, it's how quickly will that happen? If it doesn't happen quickly, he's going to start the season on the third or fourth line and then have to work his way up. I like what I've seen in training camp and in the preseason from the Russian newcomer. He is not afraid to go to the dirty areas. He's not a great skater, but he is definitely a smart hockey player. He knows the position he has to get into. He reads plays well. I loved watching him screen the Flyers goalie in the recent preseason win over the Flyers at UBS Arena. I think after a fairly slow start, Tsplakov finishes the season on the second line and ends up with 20 goals and 33 points. He's not a great passer per se. He's always been one of those Cy Young guys where he's got significantly more goals than assists. So I'm going with 20 goals, 13 assists, 33 points for Maxim Tsplakov this year with the New York Islanders. Let's also talk a little bit about Bo Horvat. Now, everydayers, you know, we mentioned on Wednesday's show, he is expected to be named an alternate captain for this year. I think that's very well deserved. I think the addition of Anthony Duclair benefits Bo and Barzy. So to me, Bo Horvat, 35 goals, 70 points this year. A roughly 35-35 split. I think he's going to just have a solid season, just a little bit better than what he had statistically last year. But I think his overall game is going to be a little bit better than it was a year ago. As far as Matthew Barzal, I think he's going to set a new career high in goals. I think we're talking about 25 goals and 85 points. I think that is a reasonable thing to expect. I like the fact that Barzal last year started shooting more. I think the addition of Anthony Duclair may make him shoot a little less this year than he did a year ago because he's, instead of having Casey Cizikas or Hudson Fasching or, Pierre Engvall on that top line, you've got a guy who likes to shoot the puck and can put the puck in the net. So it wouldn't surprise me if the shooting statistics are off a little bit more for Matthew Barzal, but I think his overall point total will go up slightly. And because that opposing teams will have to pay a little more attention to Anthony Duclair than they did most of the guys who were playing with Bo and Barzy a year ago, I think the overall point total will remain up there. And we will continue to see success for that top trio. I think that top line is really going to shine in this upcoming season, and that is going to be a real positive. How about the goalies? How are they going to shake out in the coming year? Will Ilya Sorokin's back allow him to play? I'm going to have my fearless predictions on that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go and check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So much to bet on. The Mets and Yankees are in the postseason. You got college and pro football. Islander fans, check out the odds. Will the Islanders make the playoffs? Will Bo Horvat score 30 goals this year? Will the Islanders be over or under for their point total that's projected for them? Check out all the latest odds on FanDuel, lots to look at. So get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Goaltending, as we all know, is vital to the success of the New York Islanders, and it is vital to really any team, but for the Islanders in particular, a team that, has historically struggled to score goals in recent years, plays a defensive-oriented system, and look, I'm critical of Lou Lamoriello when I feel he deserves it, but his philosophy that you start the season, you build your team from the goal out, I think that's a solid idea. You want to have that elite goaltender in between the pipes in order to win a championship. And so the big question as the season is about to get underway is, how soon will Ilya Sorokin be ready to play? And I have to admit, we have almost no information about Ilya Sorokin's readiness. We know he's been skating on his own. We know he has not returned to practice as of the time of this recording. And it's getting, with only a week to go before the season starts and only one preseason game left coming up Friday night, it is looking highly unlikely that Ilya Sorokin will begin the season on the active roster and ready to play games. Whether he's placed on the IR or the LTIR, it'll depend. And when Lou Lamoriello and the medical staff and Sorokin get together and make that decision, that's really going to be the next time we have any kind of an idea of how serious this injury, this back situation is for Ilya Sorokin. I believe he will start the season on the LTIR and that we will not see him until early to mid-November. However, I think once he comes back, he'll be well enough for the rest of the season to play in about 30 games. So he'll more or less be splitting time once he returns, and maybe by the end of the season, playing a little bit more in goal than Varley. But I think you get him back early to mid-November. He slowly builds himself back up, probably plays, 40% of the games at first, gets up to 50, and then maybe finishes the season playing 55, 60% of the games down the stretch. If his back holds up, I think he will have a solid season after a slow start. And by the time we hit the stretch drive, he'll be ready to go. So I'm picking Sorokin to play 30 games this year. I think Varley plays 45, including the majority of the games early. And I think Hogberg ends up starting the season as the backup and probably plays somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 games, starting 7 and let's say playing 9 or 10, depending on how many times either a goalie gets hurt in the middle of a game or you're behind by a lot or ahead by a lot. But I think overall, the goaltending will hold up just fine if the Islanders defense does its job in front of those players. Another key for the Islanders is always the health of their blue line. Last year, 3 of the 6 players on the blue line missed 25 or more games. Obviously, Scott Mayfield missed 41 games and played 40 on a broken ankle. He's going to get through this year, probably play somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 games. I think Adam Pelech and Ryan Polak will also play somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 75 games. But I think the defense will kind of pull together and be a little bit better and more consistent under Patrick Waugh's system. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of an improvement. We're going to see fewer shots on goal. We're not going to see as many games where this team gives up 40 and fewer high danger chances, which means that, yeah, Semyon Varlamov may be playing 45, maybe even 50 games, but he's not going to be as exhausted as he was last year. And the same for Sorokin when he returns. The strain and the stress that it comes with facing 40, 45 shots and a lot of high danger opportunities. And, you know, we're going to see, I think, fewer situations where the Islanders are pinned down in their own zone for 90 seconds, 2 minutes, a minute. We're going to see less of that under Patrick Roy, who I think is going to be able to communicate to this team what he wants them to do as far as, getting the puck out of the zone and playing a little bit more intelligently structured defense. That is going to be a critical thing for the Islanders, and I think it will be better this year. How much better may determine whether or not this team is better. Noah Dobson, he had a breakthrough season last year, 70 points, first Islander defenseman since Dennis Potvin to reach that mark, 10 goals, 70 points. I think he will be slightly better than that if he stays healthy all year. I'm thinking 12 goals, 75 points, which is a slight step up. And the biggest key in my mind to Noah Dobson is just being a little bit smarter in his own zone and being better as the power play, a quarterback of the power play. If he can accomplish those two things, I think we're going to see, him take that next step as a player for the New York Islanders. And again, that is going to be really important. Two players who I think are going to struggle this year: Samuel Bolduc and Pierre Engvall. Why? For Samuel Bolduc, I think it's because he's going to be the seventh defenseman. And for a guy at his stage of his career, where, you really need him to be playing every day to develop, he's not going to get that chance early on in the season, and it's just going to stagnate his growth. To me, Bolduc needs to be in the lineup. If you have faith that Samuel Bolduc is good enough or will be good enough to really take that next step forward and help this team in a big way, then you need to make sure that he is in the lineup consistently. And even if you have to send him down to Bridgeport, that would be okay, but he'd have to clear waivers to do that. That's unlikely to happen. The way they handled him is a problem, and I think it will continue to be a problem. The other guy who I think will struggle this year is Pierre Engvall. I don't think Engvall will find a way to make Patrick Roy happy on a consistent basis. He'll have his moments, but I think he'll be a healthy scratch more than he would like. And, I think that a guy like Julien Gauthier or Liam Foudy or, a few, maybe even Matt Martin, there are other guys who I think will be able to step up and really take that role that Pierre Engvall has and be better than him. And is it going to be embarrassing for Lou Lamoriello because the guy he signed to a 7-year extension is going to spend more time in the press box than he would like? Yeah. But is it also going to benefit the team because a better player or a player who gives you a more consistent effort and a better all-around performance will be out there? Yeah, I think that happens as well. So that's where it's kind of at as far as those two players. I think we're going to see them struggle. We will talk a little bit more about some of the other players out there. Kyle Palmieri Anders Lee. We'll talk about the power play, the penalty kill, and our prediction for the team. All of this and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. Now for your second listen, go find Locked On NHL, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Kyle Palmieri, I think he stayed healthy last year. I'm a little less confident that he'll stay healthy this year. I think it's 18 goals and 40 points, probably in about 60 games played. For Palms, Anders Lee, I think he'll still have a role on this team, but it'll be a bottom six role for most of the season. 15 goals, 28 points in my mind for Anders Lee. And for J.G. Pageau, I don't see a major bounce back offensively. I think we're talking about maybe 12 goals and 35 points, which is roughly where he was a year ago. But I think he will play better on the PK and do a little better in his own zone under Patrick Roy than he did for most of last year. Talking about the PK, we know last season this penalty kill was dead last in the NHL. One of the worst penalty kills, it wasn't just last for last year, but it was one of the bottom penalty kills of all time. It's going to get better this year. Is it going to be great? No. Tommy Alberline will help. I think we'll see Kyle McLean, who will have a pretty good year and be a full-time player on this team this year. I think we'll see him help the PK. I think they'll be somewhere around 23rd in the league, which is still an improvement of 9 spots. And I think it will at least be respectable. I'm not saying it'll be great. It may not even be in the middle or average, but I think it will not be the embarrassment that it was most of last season. And the power play will improve slightly as well. I think you can get me to 16th or 17th in the league, which is dead in the middle in the 32-team NHL. I think Anthony Duclair will help the power play. The key to improving the power play is getting a little more puck movement and a better power play quarterback. I think Dauber, as I said before, has to pick up his game a little bit. I see an improvement here. I don't see a major improvement, but I think you'll get into the middle of the pack, and that will be good. And I think one other kind of prediction that I'm going to make is that you will see improvements in part because of Patrick Roy. I think the team is ready to buy in to what he's doing. And I think that will be a big, big help for the New York Islanders. So I think we will see an effect from Roy. And I think this team will overall be a little bit better than they were a year ago. And the key question is, do they stay healthy enough? Sorokin being important, the blue line being important. I mean, Mayfield has got to bounce back and be better for sure. And then I think the other factor is this. How do the teams around them improve or not improve? The Devils certainly look better. Ottawa will be better if Linus Ullmark stays healthy and plays well. It's going to be a battle. And, you know, as far as the overall prediction that I have for this team, I think we're going to see them again in the muddy middle. And I think that they'll make the playoffs barely again, probably as a wild card, possibly, finishing third in the Metro, but it will not be all that different from last year. I think they will lose in the first round of the playoffs, but I think instead of losing in 4 or 5 games, they may go 6 or 7 and make a real series out of it. But I still don't see this team, unless their goaltending gets really hot. I still think this is a team in the muddy middle that in order to get it to the next level, you've got to trade away some of the guys on this team that you know and love. And I think Lou Lamoriello just is unable or unwilling to do that. And as a result, Brock Nelson will get his 30 goals again. He'll get like 30, 31, 32 goals, maybe 55, 60 points. I see that happening again. But, Kyle Palmieri, does he come back on a new deal? Brock Nelson, does he come back on a new deal? What do they do with Dobson and Romanov? These are all questions that will have to be answered in the second half of the season. I am not confident that Lou Lamoriello will be able to free up a lot of cap space in order to make this team significantly better going forward, even if it means taking 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. It's time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and today is the 61st birthday of former Islanders forward Pat Flatley, the Toronto native. First round pick of the Islanders in 1982, 21st overall. Played 2 years at the University of Wisconsin. Joined the Islanders after the Olympics in 1984 and stayed with the team all the way through the 95-96 season before finishing his career with the Rangers. Boy, that never looked right. Flatley twice reached the 20-goal mark and had 60 points in 1992-93. Had 9 points in 15 playoff games that year when the Islanders went to the conference final. Had 15 points in 21 playoff games in 83-84 when the Islanders went to the Cup final, but lost to the Edmonton Oilers to end their streak. One of his better games as an Islander, February 1st, 1994, at the Nassau Coliseum. The San Jose Sharks are the visitors. Arturs Irbe, the goalie for the Sharks. Jamie McLennan in between the pipes for the New York Islanders. And our Islanders birthday of the day, Pat Flatley, opened the scoring at the 9:56 mark. Derek King with the only assist. And then a little more than 2 minutes later, on the power play, it's Flatley, his second of the game, Ray Ferraro and Uwe Krupp with the assist. That makes it 2-0 Islanders. Jeff Odgers makes it 2-1 early in the second period on the power play. But then, with the Islanders shorthanded, Pat Flatley scores his 3rd goal of the game, gets the hat trick. Darius Kasparaitis and Keith Acton with the assist. Islanders then get a shorthanded goal from Benoit Hogue and end up winning the game by a score of 5-4. 20 saves for Jamie McLennan in this one. But for Pat Flatley of Heels and Flats fame, 3 goals. He gets the hat trick on 4 shots. He scored 1 shorthanded goal, 1 power play goal, 1 even strength goal. And he helps the Islanders get the 5-4 win over the San Jose Sharks. Pat Flatley, a guy who was a big part of the heart and soul of the Islanders in the 80s and into the 90s. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day, everydayers. Again, we will be back tomorrow with the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings, so make sure you join us for that. To all those who are celebrating the holiday, have a happy and healthy new year. L'Shana Tova. So want to wish everybody that. And looking forward to our next show. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.